We all dream about it, right? That
Yeah.
perfect house, maybe a porch swing out front,
Mm.
and a yard big enough for a garden and all that.
Yeah, totally.
But let's be real for a second. Saving up for a down payment sometimes feels like climbing Mount Everest in flip-flops. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and today we're gonna ditch those flip-flops and, like, gear up for a smarter climb.
We are. And that's why today's deep dive is all about creative financing.
That's right.
We're using creative financing, a guide to homeownership, as our map today. And we're going to try to help you navigate some of the other paths to owning that dream house.
Yeah, and the book, it really drives home one crucial point, and that is the power of strategy.
Okay?
It's not always about, having, like, a huge pile of cash.
Right.
It's about knowing how to use the resources that you do have.
That's a great point. And speaking of resources, the book tells the story of Jordan, who actually managed to buy a home with limited savings,
Right.
using an FHA loan, which only requires a 3.5% down payment, which is way less than that 20% we hear about all the time.
Oh,
Right?
yeah, way less. And FHA loans are even more accessible than a lot of people realize.
Really?
Yeah, there are often down payment assistance programs, even grants for people buying a home for the first time.
Wow.
And Jordan actually used a grant like that
He did.
to cut down on his upfront costs even more.
That's amazing. So even that 3.5% might not all have to come out of your pocket.
Right.
I'm starting to see how this creative thing works.
Yeah.
But what if, even 3.5% still feels like a stretch?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Have you ever heard of house hacking?
House hacking?
Yeah.
It sounds kind of illegal, but I'm intrigued.
No, no, no. It's completely legal, and it's actually really clever. So the book explains how Jordan bought a duplex. He lived in one unit and rented out the other one.
Okay.
And his tenants basically helped him cover a good chunk of his mortgage payments.
Wait, so he was living rent-free while he was building equity?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's incredible. But, okay, I got to be honest. The thought of being a landlord kind of freaks me out.
Yeah.
What if you're just not cut out for dealing with tenants?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, the book also talks about another really cool option, and that is seller financing.
Seller financing.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is where I think my brain starts to hurt a little.
It's not that complicated.
Okay, so what does that mean? What does that entail?
So basically, instead of getting a loan from a bank,
Right.
you work directly with the seller to finance the purchase.
Okay.
So you make payments to the seller, and they act as the lender.
So you're cutting out the middleman, like the bank,
Exactly.
which I'm guessing is a good thing if your credit isn't the best.
Exactly.
But finding a seller who's willing to do that must be like finding a needle in a haystack.
It's definitely less common than a traditional mortgage. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the book gives you some great advice on how to actually find sellers who are open to that kind of arrangement.
Okay, this is getting really interesting. This is like opening up a whole world of possibilities I never even knew existed. Right.
But what if you're not ready to commit to a full mortgage yet?
Well, the book has a solution for that too. It's called Lease to Own.
Lease to own. Yeah, I've heard of that, but I'm not really sure how it works.
So it's basically like a bridge between renting and buying.
Okay.
You're renting the property,
Right.
but some of your rent payments actually go towards the purchase price.
Oh, wow.
So it's a way to gradually build equity while you're saving for a down payment.
So it's like a forced savings plan, but for a house?
Exactly.
That's pretty smart. This deep dive is like blowing my mind with all these possibilities.
There's a lot out there.
Yeah, and there are even more options, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The book also mentions VA and USDA loans.
Okay.
These are zero down payment options for veterans and for people in eligible rural areas.
Wow. 0 down. That's incredible. It really shows you how many different resources are out there, even if they don't apply to everyone.
Right.
This shows that doing your research and understanding all the possibilities is crucial. Absolutely. You're totally right. And, the book's main message is all about shifting your focus from how much money do I have to what strategies can I use?
It's like you said earlier, it's all about strategy.
Yeah.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about buying a house.
Yeah,
But I have to admit, all these options feel a little overwhelming.
sure.
Where do you even begin to choose the right path,
That's a great question. And that is exactly what we are going to dig into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll look at how to assess your financial situation, choose the best strategy for you, and navigate the whole process with confidence.
Okay. I'm definitely sticking around for that.
Yeah,
I can already tell this deep dive is going to be huge for anyone out there dreaming of owning their own home.
that's what we're here for, to
Yeah.
give you the knowledge and tools you need to make good decisions on your home ownership journey.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with more on creative financing. All right, so we've Kind of like opened up this treasure chest of creative financing options.
Yeah.
But like with any good treasure hunt, there's got to be a map, right?
Absolutely.
How do we like figure out which one of these strategies is the right fit for us?
Well, the book really stresses the importance of, doing a reality check before you get carried away with the excitement of house hunting.
You mean like actually looking at our bank accounts and not just fantasizing about, granite countertops and stuff?
Exactly. It's about really taking a good look at your income, your expenses, and your credit score.
Right.
The book emphasizes that, knowing your financial situation is the foundation for making good decisions.
Okay, so no skipping straight to the fun part, huh?
Unfortunately not.
But it makes sense. I mean, you wouldn't build a house on like shaky ground, right?
Exactly. And once you have a solid understanding of your finances, you can start looking at the strategies that actually align with your situation.
Right.
Like, for example, if your credit score needs a little work,
Okay.
seller financing might be something to consider because the requirements can be a bit more flexible.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But navigating these strategies can feel a little daunting. Like, I'm not a financial expert.
Right.
Is it realistic to try and figure this out on my own?
Well, the book talks a lot about the importance of, getting help from experts.
Okay.
It encourages readers to connect with real estate agents, mortgage brokers, even financial advisors.
So it's like having a team of guides to help you navigate the terrain.
Exactly. A good real estate agent can help you find properties that fit your budget and guide you through the negotiations.
Right.
A mortgage broker can help you compare different loan options and find the best rates.
Okay, so finding the right professionals is key. But I've also heard some horror stories about pushy salespeople and, shady brokers.
Of course.
Any advice on how to, like, avoid those pitfalls?
Yeah, the book recommends doing your research, reading reviews, and asking for referrals from people you trust.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to interview multiple professionals before you make a decision.
Right.
Remember, you're hiring them to work for you.
It's about finding people who are actually invested in your success,
Yeah.
not just trying to close a deal.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the value of talking to other homeowners who've actually used these strategies.
Well, yeah.
They can offer real-world insights and encouragement.
It's like having a mentor who's already walked the path you're on.
Exactly.
But I imagine every home buying journey is different.
Sure.
What if my situation is different from everyone else's?
That's a great point. And the book does emphasize that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Okay.
What works for one person might not work for another. It's
Right.
all about understanding the basic principles and then adapting them to your own specific circumstances.
So it's not about like blindly copying someone else's playbook.
Right.
It's about understanding the game and making your own strategic moves.
Precisely. And that's what makes this book so valuable.
Okay.
It's not a rigid set of rules. It's a framework for thinking creatively and finding solutions that work for you.
I like that. Okay, I'm starting to feel a lot more confident about this whole process.
Good.
But let's be real, home buying can be a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
You can be stressful, time-consuming, and there are bound to be challenges along the way.
The book acknowledges that the journey can be demanding, but it also reminds us that the rewards are worth it.
Right.
Building equity, creating a space that's truly your own, achieving a sense of stability and accomplishment, these are powerful motivators.
And it's about shifting your mindset from can I afford this to how can I make this happen?
Exactly. You've got it.
It's about being proactive, resourceful, and persistent in pursuing homeownership.
Yeah.
So we've laid out the groundwork, assembled our team of experts, and we've even got a can-do attitude now.
Yeah.
What's next? How do we take all this information and actually put it into action?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll get into the details of each strategy, uncover the pros and cons, the potential pitfalls, and the key steps to make it all work.
All right, so we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive into creative financing. We've explored the landscape, we kind of mapped out our strategy, and we even put together our team of experts.
We did.
But now it's time to really roll up our sleeves and get into the nuts and bolts of each approach.
Yeah, let's get specific.
Let's start with FHA loans, since we've talked about those quite a bit already.
Okay.
What are some of the main advantages and disadvantages we should keep in mind?
Well, one of the biggest pluses with FHA loans is that lower down payment requirement, like you said, only 3.5% versus the usual 20%.
Right.
And that can be a huge deal for first-time buyers or anyone who doesn't have a lot of savings.
Yeah, that lower barrier to entry is huge.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's a trade-off, right?
Yeah, there is.
Lower down payment probably means higher monthly payments, right?
That's usually the case. Yeah, FHA loans typically come with mortgage insurance premiums, which adds to your monthly costs.
Okay.
And there are specific requirements you have to meet, like debt-to-income ratios, and minimum credit scores.
So it's not a free pass.
Yeah.
You still have to be financially responsible to qualify.
Exactly.
But let's say you do qualify and you're cool with the monthly payments. What are some potential, pitfalls to watch out for?
One thing to remember is that FHA loans have stricter appraisal requirements. So if the appraisal comes back lower than the price you agreed on, you might have to renegotiate with the seller
Oh, okay.
or come up with the extra cash yourself.
Okay, so doing your homework during the appraisal process is super important.
Absolutely.
Sounds like there's a lot to think about with FHA loans, but they definitely seem like a solid option for a lot of buyers.
Yeah, for sure.
But what about house hacking? It seemed like such a genius idea when we talked about it earlier. Are there any downsides to that approach?
Well, house hacking can be an awesome way to build equity and maybe even live rent-free, but it does come with challenges.
Okay, so like what?
You're essentially becoming a landlord, which comes with all the responsibilities and potential headaches that go with that.
Right, dealing with tenants,
Mm-hmm.
maintenance problems, late rent payments, all that fun stuff.
Exactly. You have to be comfortable managing property and dealing with tenant issues.
Yeah.
And you have to factor in the time commitment and the potential financial risks.
Right.
Like, what if you have an empty unit for a while, or you have to make big repairs? You have to be ready for those things.
So it's not as easy as just buying a duplex and then sitting back and collecting rent checks.
No, not quite.
It takes planning and a realistic look at your own abilities
Yeah.
and how much risk you're willing to take.
Exactly.
But for those who are up for it, it can be a really rewarding strategy.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, now let's talk about seller financing. We touched on it earlier, but I'm still kind of fuzzy on the details.
Sure.
What are some of the key things to think about with this approach?
Well, one of the best things about seller financing is how flexible it is.
Hmm.
You can often work out terms that are better than a traditional mortgage, especially if you have a good relationship with the seller.
That's good, but
Mhm.
how do you even find sellers who are willing to do that? Seems like a pretty big ask.
It's definitely not as common as bank financing, but there are ways to find those motivated sellers.
Okay.
The book suggests looking for properties that have been on the market for a long time, maybe those owned by investors who are looking for a quick sale, or even reaching out to sellers directly to propose the idea.
So it takes a little more effort and creativity, but the potential payoff is there.
Yeah.
But I bet there are some downsides too, right? What are some red flags to watch out for?
One thing to be careful about is potential legal issues. It's really important to have a solid contract that clearly lays out all the terms of the agreement.
Right.
That way, both you and the seller are protected.
So legal expertise is crucial here.
Yeah, you don't want to try and figure that out yourself.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
But if you do it right, it sounds like seller financing can really open doors for buyers who might not qualify for a regular mortgage.
Exactly.
Now let's shift gears to lease to own. We talked about it earlier as a stepping stone to homeownership, but I'd love to dig a little deeper.
Okay.
How does it actually work in the real world?
So with a lease to own, you usually pay a little more in rent than the market rate, and part of that extra rent goes towards your down payment.
Okay.
You also lock in a purchase price, which is great if home values are going up.
So you're basically getting a head start on owning a home while you're still renting.
That's the idea.
That's pretty smart, but I'm sure there are some catches.
Yeah.
What are some things to be aware of before signing a lease-to-own agreement?
The main thing is that if you decide not to buy the place at the end of the lease, you usually lose the part of your rent that was going towards the down payment.
Oh, okay. So it's a real commitment, not just a casual rental.
Right.
You need to be pretty sure you want to buy the place before you go this route.
Definitely.
Sounds like there's a lot to consider with lease-to-own, but it could be a good option for people who need a little more time to save up for a down payment.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about FHA loans, house hacking, seller financing, lease to own.
We did.
We even touched on VA and USDA loans.
Mhm.
It's clear there are many different paths to home ownership, and it's all about finding the one that fits your situation.
Exactly. And the key takeaway from this whole deep dive is that you don't have to be stuck with that old 20% down payment myth.
Right.
There are creative solutions out there, and with the right knowledge and the right strategy, you can unlock the door to your dream home.
I love that. And that's what we're all about here, giving you the information and tools you need to make smart choices on your homeownership journey. So what are you going to do with all this new knowledge? Which one of these strategies speaks to you? What's your next move? Don't let that dream house stay a dream. Start exploring your options. Talk to those experts we mentioned and take that first step towards making it a reality.
Me too.
We're here to cheer you on every step of the way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into creative financing.